Hello and welcome everyone. Greetings from Alumni Relations Cell, BITS Pilani Goa. Thank you for joining us for the GRE Champs talk today. I am Gurbaaz and I'll be co-hosting this talk with Ananthan.
Hi, I'm Ananthan. Graduate Record Examination is a standardized test conducted by Education Testing Services. It's an admissions requirement for many graduate schools, especially those in English speaking countries such as the USA and Canada.
We have with us Advait Rane and Punya Modi who have aced the GRE to share their insights and their journey. We hope that this session will clarify all your doubts and provide the right path to follow your dreams. Our first panelist, Advait Rane, is a master's student in computer science program at the USC Viterbi School of Engineering. He completed his BE in the computer science from BITS Pilani Goa in 2021 and graduated as a gold medalist. He has also worked as a remote collaborator at the MIT Media Lab during his undergraduate thesis. He appeared for the GRE in 2020 and scored 339 out of 340, scoring 170 in quantitative reasoning and 169 in verbal reasoning, with a score of 4.5 in the analytical writing assessment. Passing the virtual mic over to you, Advait.
Thank you so much, Gurbaaz. That was a very nice introduction. I hope everyone here is settling in for a good weekend. I personally am settling in for a long weekend, so that's exciting. But anyway, so we're here to talk about the GRE, right? And I think before I start talking about that, I just want to say this one thing, which is I think at least for me and for most of us, this is the first step, right, in the entire undertaking of doing your applications, waiting for them to come out, and then finally going to wherever you're going. And it's a long process. There's going to be ups and downs, but I think I just want to start off by saying that um, whoever is going to do this, just you have to sit tight and trust the process and take it one step at a time, right? And so the GRE is basically what might be like your first step. So as for my preparation, that's honestly a very good hack for this. And I'm pretty much gonna go by what I used from what I got from a senior. So I don't know if you guys know Amog Dabolkar and Dhruva Barfiwala. Both of them are a year senior to me. They're both studying at Georgia Tech right now, and they gave the GRE a year before me. And so both of them have compiled of a lot of guidelines and a lot of books in this repository that they have on GitHub. I'm trying to share the link in the chat. I hope everybody can see it. You guys can go check it out. It's a very good repository. I don't think Amog's going to be joining this call, but do message him if you find it to be useful, and I think he'll love it if you guys use it too. So if you have a look at the repository, it has three main sections, right? There's a vocab prep folder, which tells you about stuff like Magoosh and Baron, and I think for me, I majorly use Magoosh. There is another one for GRE books, which talks about Manhattan and Princeton and a bunch of other books. And I'll talk about each of these in detail in a bit, but personally for me, again, I primarily used Manhattan. And they also talk about AWA, which we can get to in a second. I think the key really for me was just practicing from these books consistently for a while. So as far as the books are concerned, I think I might have worked on them for about 2 or 2.5 months, right? And you don't need to go all out with it. You have maybe 2 hours a day when you start off, right? And and as long as you do that consistently for the first month, you get into the groove. I think you're gonna do a really good job of completing a lot of these books, and you're gonna be very comfortable when you're actually gonna give the final exam. Um, the thing that you might want to start early is using the vocab prep stuff, right? So for example, stuff like Magoosh, which is a free app on Play Store. You can go and download it whenever. It's never too early, it's never too late. It's a great app. It has a bunch of flashcards, which is basically just a card with a word on it. You can click on it, you see the meaning, and you just keep going through those cards. There's a bunch of cards, and there's multiple decks. And you might want to start doing this earlier because there's a lot of words on it. And one way to do it is, you just you like learning the language maybe, or you just read a lot. I think that was one of the questions that we will probably take on later. And the question goes like, how do I need to go through vocab if I'm not hardcore into reading? You don't really need to be hardcore into reading. Obviously, if you are, that's a bonus. It's always going to help you, but there are all of these books and apps and tricks that will help you get through it even without, you don't have to go through literature or whatever to learn all of these words. And so one way to do it obviously is if you are into learning the language and into reading, but the other way is you can just do this app over a period of time, go through the cards multiple times, and by the time you're going it for the third or fourth time, you're gonna be much better at these words than you were at the start, right? So Magoosh is something I believe I might have started. I want to say three months before I gave my exam, and also for me the timeline is a little dicey because when I gave my exam, there was a lockdown and there wasn't a lockdown. So, I mean, that's another story. But the timeline for me might be a little dicey. You can obviously adjust the timeline to whatever you're comfortable with. So, Magoosh is amazing, right? It's a mobile app at the end of the day. So, it's going to happen that, you use the app and then you get bored, you switch to Instagram, you spend an hour on the gram, and you just end up feeling like you wasted the day. But that is going to happen. I think at the end of the day, as long as you keep going back to it, you're going to get through the vocab. Something that Dhruva and Amog actually talk about in the repository, and I think that was majorly helpful for me, is as a part of your vocab prep, you want to make your own list of words. When you're going through Magoosh, when you're going through the books, when you're solving questions, and you see words that you think might be tricky, words that you think you won't remember too well, you want to write those down in a separate list so that you can go through them on your own time later, right? And uh, obviously the words are going to be there on the app and they're going to be there in the books, but I think it's more of just writing it down once somewhere you can look at it whenever you want. That's what helps, right? And then you can just look at it whenever. You can look at it at the end of a day, you can look at it at the start of a day. It's your own list. So coming to the books, obviously the books are very helpful for your verbal prep, right? I primarily went through Manhattan 5 pound, which is a great book. It has a lot of material. Uh, the level I'd say is a little harder than the actual level, so it does kind of prepare you well for the questions that you are going to face. Um, when I was done with Manhattan, and again, you don't have to be done with the book, you can just be comfortable with all the questions in it. But for me personally, when I was done with the I went through Princeton just to review the kind of questions that are there. But what you really want to be doing too is solving the official books because at least according to my opinion, the official GRE verbal and quant books have questions that are very similar to the level of questions that you're actually going to be giving. So once you're comfortable solving the slightly more difficult questions, you do want to go through the actual level of questions. And whenever you're doing all of this, do keep a track of timing. It's super important to know how fast or how slow you want to do your question. And coming to timing, I think math, right? Because honestly, the only thing in the quant section is managing to do it correctly in that given amount of time. So it's very simple to ignore the math because it's a lot simpler than the levels that we're used to. But you really should not be ignoring it. And I don't mean you need to like put a lot of effort into it. I think personally for me, when I was going through the books, 2 hours every day, I tried to do math every second or third day. Sorry, every third or fourth day. And it's a lot simpler to get through a math section than a verbal section. So you can really just treat that as like a cheat day. And instead of having to go through the verbal section and being all stressed out about 100 words, you can just do the quant for a day get get comfortable with those sort of questions, time yourself, and go ahead. So about timing with math, what worked really well for me was I tried to solve all of the questions twice in the time that you have. So I think we will talk about the structure of the exam later. But the amount of time that you have for math, I think for most of our levels, from everything I've heard about people's experience giving the GRE, you're going to have more time than you need. And so what worked really well for me was just doing the entire thing twice, right?
Wait, let's just continue with the introduction of Punya also, and then we'll continue with this.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
That sounds good.
I hope the audience found that helpful, and thank you for sharing your story with us, Advait. It's really insightful. Our second speaker, Punya Modi, is currently a final year student pursuing BE in Electronics and Communication Engineering at its Pilani Goa Campus. He appeared for the GRE this year in 2021 and scored 331 out of 340. He scored 170 in the quantitative reasoning and 161 in the verbal reasoning sections. He scored a 4 in the analytical writing assessment. Punya, I pass over the virtual mic to you.
Hey guys, hope everyone's doing well. So, uh, my first experience with the GRE was actually the GRE Champs talk last year, because even though at that point I was like, I'm going to start, I wanted to pursue a master's after my college. I wasn't really sure where to start. And so last year's GRE Champs talk was actually where I got to know more about the GRE and decided how to prep for it. So, like Advait said, GRE is just the first step. Like, I'm going through the process of applying for colleges right now for my master's, and GRE is like the first step most people take, because GRE is something, its score is valid for 5 years after you give it. Hence, most people try taking that as the first thing that they do. And once they have a GRE score they're satisfied with, is when a lot of people start looking at everything else that you need to do to apply for a master's. I personally, um, from last year's GRE Champs talk and all the speakers there, like after talking to them, I realized that most of them just use Magoosh, and Magoosh not as only the mobile app, but rather Magoosh as preparing service. So it's obviously a paid subscription when you're trying to subscribe to Magoosh. It has different tiers. I ended up taking a 1 month Magoosh subscription. I gave a test, one of the mock tests before I even started prepping, to see which level was I at. And once I had that is when I kind of made the plan that, okay, this is my current level. I'm going to take a month and I'm going to give the GRE regardless of where I am at that point, because I only work well with hard deadlines. Like if you just tell me, oh, you have your own time to give a test, it's not going to happen. So after giving my mock test, the second thing I did was, okay, I'll probably take a month, which I kind of realized after talking to other people who'd given it, because my initial scores were close to they were like low 320s, high 310s at that point. So I was just like, okay, after talking to seniors, I was like, okay, a month should be enough. The second thing I did was actually just book the test for a month later. And this was in April 2021. So I was also scared about the second wave, so I booked it pretty early, and then I just prepped for an entire month. I personally did not use any references besides Magoosh itself. I focused mostly in Magoosh, and that's where I at least did all my quantitative and verbal reasoning sections from that point. Like Advait said, I think for most people, especially from like India and from BITS, quant is not going to be a very big problem for most of us, because the level of questions and like the theories asked are mostly from stuff we did in 11th and 12th, and it's easier. So I think it was more about making sure that each question you did was correct, because again, like a 170 or like 168, 169, 170 is what's expected if you're applying for an engineering master's. That's kind of the quant score they want, especially. So just like Advait, I tried finishing the quant section once as quickly as possible, usually within like 80% of the time, and then or like actually between 70 and 80% of the time given. And then the last part was when I just did everything again to make sure I didn't make a silly mistake or, some small error which might lose me a mark or two. For the verbal section, Ananthan, you wanna say something?
No, Punya, you can continue.
Sorry. Yeah, so for the verbal section, for me, I felt that I do read in general a lot, so I did not have that big of a problem with the reading comprehension, which was one of the types of questions asked. However, the other questions were very based on vocabulary. And for the same, I did end up using the Magoo's flashcards. I felt like those were easier way to deal with it. What I did, an approach I took, which was different from a lot of people, was I wrote down every flashcard and their meaning, and I also wrote down a sentence associated with it because I remember stuff a lot better when I write. And if I have a sentence which I can remember instead of the word and the meaning, it helps me correlate the meanings better. I think those were the two main things I did for quant and verbal. Coming to the analytical writing, I think analytical writing is one which is very, it's kind of, everyone has a very different method to prep for it because everyone obviously starts off at a different point. I think the first thing that almost everyone should do is go through the analytical writing, whatever's given on the ETS website, ETS being the organization that conducts GRE. Because in that they've very clearly mentioned, like, what do they want from our analytical writing answers, or what is expected, how it's graded, because it has a holistic grading, as they call it. So it's out of 6 each one of your analytical writing portions, and each one of those is graded out of 6, and then they take an average of it. So having an idea of how they're grading it will obviously help out in preparing for it. Also, the website has a huge question bank of previous questions asked. So it also helps give you an idea of the kind of questions they ask in this section.
Thanks a lot, Punya. I think it was very valuable for the audience here. We'll move on to the question and answer segment of this talk now. Over to you, Gurbaaz.
Gurbaaz, I think you're on mute.
We will try to accommodate as many questions as possible. If you have any questions during the talk, please feel free to type them in the question box in the control panel. The speakers will try to address those when they are not speaking, and also we have some time at the end for the questions. On that note, let's start. So the first question for both of you is that when, according to you, is the right time to appear for the GRE? And when should we start preparing for this thing? You both can share that, like how you went about it. So Advait, you can start first.
Oh, thanks. So for me, I think I decided to go for like graduate school midway through my third year, or yeah, into my 6th semester. And so for me, the best time to give it probably would have been, say, June, right? Because I get some time in the summers to prepare. And it depends on what you have, what plans you have for the summer again. So if you have an internship lined up, then you might want to adjust it accordingly. For me, I didn't actually give it in June because I think we were still in lockdown back in June of 2020. And even without that deadline, I just kept preparing for it. So that kind of worked in my favor because I was at a point where when the lockdown could open up, I could give the exam as soon as I got an available date. And so when I actually gave it was August of 2020. And so when I gave it in August of 2020, I think I got the 2 months in the summers and a little bit more for my prep to go for August. Yeah.
And Punya, what's your take on this?
So I think one of my circumstances for doing this was also COVID, because I gave it right. My date was almost primarily decided because of COVID, because I gave it right before the second lockdown. So I also was thinking about masters and the like, and it was in my 7th semester. That's my 3-2 when I was like, okay, sorry, sixth semester, my bad. Sixth semester when I was like, I want to go for a master's. So, and then I kind of came to that realization like close to when my mid semesters were approaching. So then I was like, okay, I'm gonna start thinking about all this prep after mid semesters, and that's when I started looking at GRE properly. Uh, that's when again I was not 100% sure as to when to give it, and then we had a lot of news obviously coming saying cases are increasing and stuff like that, and I really did not want to give GRE at home because it has a few limitations, which one of the main ones being that you need continuous electricity supply, and that's not there at my house. So I was like, I have to give it a test center if it's going to be successful for me. So that's when I was like, I'm gonna give a mock test, because having a mock test and knowing where you stand before your prep kind of helps you out, because then based on that you can also have an idea of how much time will you need based on how well you're scoring in all the three sections. Once I had that, I was confident that I'd have a month should be enough, including my third year academics, to actually give the test.
Thank you, Punya and Advait. So the next question is, can you tell a little bit about the exam structure? Like, how does the GRE exam go about? So Punya, you can start with it.
All right. I do have a PPT regarding this. So just a second. I need to present. Just a second. Okay. So the GRE takes approximately 3 hours and 45 minutes to give. However, if you're going to a test center, you should probably show up at least 30 minutes early, because they actually do proper checks and the like. So if you're going to a test center, I would say at the test center, you would be there for approximately anywhere between 4 hours and 4.5 hours. So as you can see, what you have, you initially start the GRE with the analytical essay, the AWA as it's called. There's 2 questions to that, and each one is 30 minutes. After which you have 5 sections. These 5 sections can be either quantitative or verbal sections. You will have a minimum of 2 verbal sections and 2 quantitative sections. The verbal sections being 30 minutes and the quantitative sections being 35 minutes. Besides these 2 graded verbal and quantitative sections, you have one experimental section which is given by ETS. That does not count towards your grade. However, this can be either verbal or quantitative, and you do not know which section is actually the experimental section. So you have to give all 5 sections with like all seriousness, because you don't know which one is actually not going to be counted towards your score. One of the things here is that you do have a proper 10-minute break, and usually that's when they let you exit the test room at least at the test centers, and that's when you can have water or have some food if you've gotten some food with you. I think again, we talked about, me and Advait did cover this slightly. Yeah. So again, just making the point again about, I think with quantitative, it is better if you actually just try finishing it as quickly as possible and then redoing each question so that you make sure you have no mistakes out there. Now, verbal reasoning is something I want to elaborate a bit more on. So there's 3 types of questions in verbal reasoning: text completion, sentence equivalence, and reading comprehension. So every GRE verbal section you'll have your text completion questions. Then you will have you'll have a set of reading comprehension questions. After which you will have your sentence equivalence questions. And again, finally, you will have a set of reading comprehension questions. So and you're allowed to navigate through your entire section while giving the test. So it makes sense to kind of just go through and know what's going on, so that you're not caught like at the end when you have like 2 minutes left and you're like, oh, okay, they're all reading comprehension questions, because sometimes reading comprehension questions do take a bit longer. Another thing I would like to point out here is that the GRE is the sections for verbal and quantitative are adaptive, meaning that if your initial verbal or quantitative sections don't go well, the next sections that will come up for verbal and quantitative will actually be easier compared to what some other people might get who've done the questions well or who've done that entire section well. However, this will also mean that you will not get a good score, because GRE scoring is not just a +1, or not a +1, like each question doesn't get you a mark. It's a lot more complicated than that. So if in case you do mess up your initial sections, then the next sections will be easier, but that also means you will not get, there's no chance of you getting like a high 160s, like 167, 168, 169, 170. There's no chance of you getting that. So ideally be very while you're doing that, because that's a pretty important part to it. Analytical writing, I think, is something that everyone separately talks about, but since it's in the beginning of your GRE, it kind of also impacts it. Like if you do mess up these two, the two questions in this, it can affect your how you approach the rest of the exam. So there's two questions to this, one being analyze an issue and the other one being analyze an argument, each being given 30 minutes. Now again, both essays are graded out of 6 holistically, and your AWA score is going to be an average of the both of them. Yeah.
Yeah, so Advait, you want to add something to this?
No, I think he summarized it pretty well, actually. That was a very nicely structured PPT. So yeah, I think everything Punya said, I just second it, and yeah, we can go on to the next one.
So I hope the presentation and the answer was very helpful for the audience here. And we move on to the next question, which is how should we allocate the time while preparing for the different sections? And is there any specific section where one should focus more? Advait, would you like to go first?
Sure, yeah. So again, this is a very subjective question, right? It really depends on how you want to approach your GRE and your prep. For me, I felt like spending more time on verbal was what I needed, because it's a little harder than the kind of exams that I was used to giving, in the sense that, you know, some of the words are more difficult, some of the types of questions are things that we haven't seen before. And so I spent more time on verbal, but you definitely want to spend some amount of time on all of the sections. For AWA, honestly, I didn't spend a lot of time in the start. Once I was in a good place with my verbal and quant, I think near the 2 week mark, like when 2 weeks were left for my exam, that's when I started sort of going through the kind of sample essays, sample issues and arguments that are out there in the different books, and you know, you can maybe try writing them too. But yeah, so for me, majorly it was a lot. It was a lot of time spent on verbal, sometimes spent on quant, and near the end you want to get your AWA.
That was helpful. Punya, you want to add something to it?
Yeah, sure. So again, I personally did obviously focus most of my time on verbal, because that's, I think, something most people applying do generally. However, I felt like I basically practiced. I had Magoosh as the service for GRE, right? So in that, I had the option of giving a quant section every day, and that's what I did for like all my 30 days. And every day I was focusing more, rather than even finishing all of them or getting all of them correct. I was trying to finish them as quickly as possible, so that I would in the test have the time like to do it once again, because at the end of the day there's not any concepts, or there's no new concepts, honestly. Like it's just you having to practice more and more. So I spent like 20 minutes a day doing the quant section at least. And then my preparation for verbal was again based mostly on Magoosh. Magoosh has a lot of videos, and I think these videos, Magoosh also has a textbook which covers the same concepts, but Magoosh has a lot of videos, especially for its especially for the verbal part, where they analyze the type of questions that come, and that helps a lot, because once you go through those videos, you have a much clearer grasp of okay, you know, I have the question in front of me. This is exactly what they want, and this is how I need to answer it. Having that at the back of your head always helps out. So I did a lot of Magoosh videos for verbal, besides obviously having to increase my vocabulary using the flashcards. For analytical writing, I feel like that is an important part, because I personally know I messed up my analytical writing, at least the first one, because I didn't pay enough attention to it. So I think a big part of it is you have 30 minutes, and they just give you a question, and from that you need to actually figure out how to structure an entire 3-paragraph essay, at least 3 paragraphs usually, as it's recommended. So in that, I did not have a good grasp of time, at least for my first question, because not only do you have to type all of that out, GRE does not have a spell check. So if you make any typos, or if you even forget, even if you know, like, you can spell everything correctly, if in a hurry you make typos, you still have to go through your essay, edit it, and make sure you don't have typos. I messed that up for my first question, and I know that went with like a lot of typos because I didn't have time to actually go through them because I barely finished maths. So I feel practicing AWA, especially like not leaving it until the last week or last 2 weeks, will be a good thing, so that you actually will not be caught by, like, you won't be surprised when it happens, especially because that's like the first thing you give. So if you mess that up, there's a good chance it's going to affect your performance later. Like, you might just, while you're solving some other section, be like, oh damn, I messed up AWA, I have to give this again, kind of a situation.
Yeah, so thank you, Punya, for sharing your thoughts. Advait, Punya talked about his mock test scores and how much time he devoted to it. So, what, in your opinion, how much time did you spend on the mock tests, and how much did you score in the test you attempted? I guess you're on mute.
I'm sorry. Yeah. So if we talk about the mock test that I gave before my prep, it's been a while, honestly. But I think it wasn't a great. I think it might be around like 310 or 315, something like that. So when you make your ETS account, that's when you get to do 2 free mock tests of the actual GRE in the actual setting, right? You have the exact same interface and the kind of questions and the timing, everything, and you can sit and do that properly. I think those mock tests are something that's really, really helpful. But again, you want to give those once you're prepared for it, to some extent. I think on those, the scores that I had were around 332 and 336. Yeah, it was around those numbers.
So I hope this was useful for the audience. So let's move on to the next question. How did you manage your GRE preparation and the college curriculum simultaneously? Punya, would you like to answer this first?
Yeah. So I was in 3-2, which was basically last semester. And to be fair, it was online. So you had ways to go around college curriculum per se. But I think the way I prepared, I kind of only gave it like an hour and a half between like between classes, because I never had any continuous classes. So I used to do it between classes during the day itself. At least everything went magoosh, like, which was me practicing verbal and quant. My AWA and for my vocab, I did it later. And because I started right after midsems, you kind of have some leeway right after midsems, where last semester at least they took it a bit easier because they had time. And so I had like a week where we basically didn't do much in college, and then after that, since it was project based, I was able to manage it more here and there.
So thank you, Punya. And Advait, do you have anything to say about it?
I think based on the question, Punya is probably a better person to answer it. I gave mine when I was doing my thesis. So at that point in time, I had really had a lot of flexibility, because my calls used to be at night at 7 p.m. because I was working on EST. And so what I used to do is, right in the morning, I used to get a couple of hours of my prep done, and then I used to sit and do the work that I had. So yeah, I didn't really have any assignments and stuff like that. There were a few deadlines, but I think I had a lot more flexibility in terms of the amount of time I have to dedicate to different things. Yeah, but that really depends again on how your thesis is going. If you have a thesis that makes you work a lot, then you might need to find pockets of time, the way Punya went through his schedule, and try to get a couple of hours in every day, or at least an hour and a half at the start, an hour and a half at the start. Yeah.
Thank you, Advait. So the next question is, what are the pros and cons of going for masters right after the college versus working for some time? Like, does work experience give an extra edge during the selection process by universities? Advait, I guess you are a better person to answer it first.
Yeah, okay, well, so there's a lot of sides to the argument. I think personally for me it made more sense to go right after my masters because the kind of work that I would be able to do after my bachelor's was not something that I was very interested in going ahead for. Um, but again, that really depends on what sort of work you're looking to do after you've done your degree. If working as an SDE is something that you enjoy and something that you like, or moreover you want to get some sort of industry experience, then it makes perfect sense to go for a job, get your experience, make some money, and then go for your masters. So yeah, I think it's a very subjective thing. The pros and cons, as far as I've heard of them and from what I've experienced, one of the advantages is that right after your bachelor's, you're going to be in touch with academics, maybe even academia, maybe even professors. So for one, you're going to get good academic LORs, which was something that worked out for me because I was still talking to my professors, I was still talking to my thesis professor. Obviously, you can do that once you've gotten into a job too. You just have to probably, stay in touch or continue doing some sort of academic activity. Again, this only depends on what sort of LORs you want for yourself. From what I've heard or read, um, again, the work experience that they want when they're reviewing your application really depends on what your application says you want to do. So, for example, if your application says you want to work in some specific field, let's say crypto, and all the work that you've done as an SDE is something that's not very well aligned with that, then that work experience might not be the most helpful, right? Because it's not telling them how you're useful. It's not telling them how you're going to be good at the thing that you want to specialize in. But for example, if you've actually worked in a company that's doing the same thing that you want to specialize in, or you've kept in touch with a project that that's working in what you want to specialize in, that sort of work experience is going to be very, very helpful because it literally makes your application a lot stronger for the thing you're applying for. So yeah, there's different ways to look. I think it's very subjective. So honestly, like I'd also be open, like whoever the people that have this question, I'd also be open to talking to them about it, personally, because answering it right now, I'm not going to be able to give like a specific answer. Even when I talk to you personally, it's just my opinion. It's not a specific answer, but yeah, there's pros and cons to both.
So I hope that was very insightful. Thank you, Advait. So we'll move on to the next question, which is what steps should we take right now in college to increase our chances of getting accepted abroad? So what kind of projects, what kind of internship, and what is the role in getting into a foreign college? So Punya, would you like to tackle this?
All right. So just a disclaimer: I am still in my fourth year here. My answers are again based on what I've heard from senior people, other people who've gotten into college. So I think again there is. It honestly depends upon what you want to do post. Like when you apply, you basically sell yourself where you sell a version of yourself. Like this is what I've been doing since I was in college. I've been interested in this topic for this long. And this is just an example. So what you want to do in college again kind of depends upon what you like right now to boost your application will again depend upon where you're applying, what are you applying for, because there's not going to be any general thing out there which you'll do and be like, okay, this is going to boost my application. It's very subject specific. For example, if you want to apply for, like a general example, you want to apply for a computer vision, let's just say CMU has a computer vision course, you're applying there, and you don't have anything in computer vision. You've done like 30 different things in college, but nothing is related to, say, machine learning, computer vision, anything like that. Then again, it won't really show, like it doesn't help out that much in your entire application again, right? So all of this really depends upon what steps you want to take as to where you're going post BITS or post college.
Thank you, Punya. And Advait, what are your thoughts on this? Since you've already taken admission abroad, I think you'll have a better idea.
Could you just say the question one more time, just so I'm sure
I'll
about
repeat the
what we're
question.
asking?
So, what steps should we take right now in college to increase our chances of getting accepted abroad? So, what sort of projects, what sort of internships did you do, and what is their role in getting into a good college abroad?
Right. So again, absolutely what Punya said about you want to make it relevant to what you're going to apply for. Obviously, it's difficult to know what you're going to apply for depending on what stage of college you're in. A lot of times, the projects that you do might inform you what you want to apply for too. And so there's two ways to look at it. Basically, if there's something that you're very sure about, if there's something very specific that you're sure you want to do, then you want to try and get into some sort of project, a research project with a professor, say, if the professor is industry contacts with an industry where you're actually going to be learning the sort of skills that are going to help you apply for that project. So I'm pretty sure it's like, for example, the example that Punya gave about computer vision, I'm pretty sure there's enough professors in BITS that are working with, say, deep neural nets or CNNs and stuff like that. I'm pretty sure a lot of the people attending know more about this than I do. And you can really just find projects through professors or keep talking to professors about stuff that interests you and try to get into some sort of good research, which strengthens the academic side of your application. Obviously, it's not like an absolute necessity that you have some sort of research experience. You can absolutely make it to an amazing college by having good industrial, good internships and good contacts with your seniors or with your supervisors in an internship. You can get a lot of LORs that way too. I think the path I sort of took was trying to work with professors because that was of more interest to me. But yeah, it's really just doing what interests you and letting that inform what sort of program you wanna apply for. Yeah, I hope that was helpful.
Yeah, thank you, Advait. Talking about the academic side, apart from the GRE score, how important is the GPA or the CGPA we get in the college? Like, if someone has a low CGPA, is it a thing to worry? Should he like try to do something to like push it up? Like, how important is the CGPA if we are applying it? If we are applying for master, like, would it make a difference?
Should I be taking this?
Yeah, Advait, you can start.
Again, so this is so your application it's a combined thing, right? Obviously you can dissociate different parts of it and look at it individually, but I think if your GPA is lower and your work experience is amazing, then that's sort of gonna work towards, like, it might just cancel out the aspect about the GPA. Obviously, I've never been privy to any of the conversations that happen when the reviewers are going through applications. So this is just what I've heard and what I've read. But your GPA is something you can work around. Obviously, if you can improve it, improve it. I mean, a better score never hurts, but if you have something else that makes your application a lot stronger, if the GPA isn't the main thing on your application, that's perfectly all right. Yeah. So even with like a low GPA, if you have some great project going, if you have some great internship, that's going to work in your favor, at least from what I've heard. But that is also program specific. So there are some programs that are going to be like, we have some sort of threshold. So it really depends on what sort of programs you want to apply for, what sort of projects you have done, and what your application looks like as a whole. But at the end of the day, if you can improve it, obviously improve it, because it's personal.
Would you like to add something?
Again, like Advait said, there is no set. It's when you apply for masters outside India, there is no set procedure or something by which you know that your application is going to be stronger than someone else or weaker than someone else. So again, it depends upon how your the application is there. There is someone I know from Hyderabad who has a CGPA of like a 7.1, which is pretty low. But he's doing computer vision at CMU because he actually was a co-author of a paper that got accepted in multiple international, I think, summits or whatever. I'm not sure exactly where it was, but he has multiple papers under his name and the like. So again, he sold that part of him, saying, I actually worked or have done a lot of research in this field already, and that's how he put forth his application. And so his CGPA didn't matter. If you have something that can help, shift the focus away from your CGPA, it'll obviously help if you have a lower CGPA.
So thank you for that, Punya. That was quite useful. We'll move on to the next question. Is prior research experience necessary for an MS in CS if one is not aiming towards a research-focused MS in general? So Advait, would you like to go for this one?
Oh, again, that's tricky. Everything I say is just my opinion, and it can be right or wrong based on where you're applying to. So when you say you're applying for a non-research focused MS, there's a lot of programs like that. There are programs that are more industry oriented, that are more practical training oriented. I haven't applied to those programs, but my understanding of the reviewing process would mean that it wouldn't be as necessary to have your research experience. But when you apply for a general MSCS program, like a general track, without any of the qualifiers that make it like a practical training or a industry oriented thing, for the general track, my understanding of it is that having research experience makes your application stronger. Again, this is stuff that I've heard from my seniors. The reason is something along the lines of that's what a lot of universities expect out of graduate students studying general CS. But that's probably not something a university would expect out of someone who's studying a practical training oriented course. So I don't think it's necessary, if I understand the question correctly. I don't think it's necessary to have research experience, but know that there probably will be a small number of applicants that will still be applying with research experience, and that might give them some sort of an edge. It's terrible that the whole thing's a very competitive process and you don't know who's coming from where and what background. So the only thing that you can do is make your application stronger for yourself. And I think in that situation, if research experience is not something that you're interested in personally, and it's not going to strengthen your application because that's not what you want to do, then that's not a necessary aspect of your application.
I would like to add on to that. If you are looking for a more professional course, or something which you want to do, like after doing masters, you want to go into the industry, and if it's in computer science, look at some MTech courses, because a few universities in the US have a parallel MSc and a MTech course of like computer science or a specific field in computer science. The courses have a slight difference, but again, one is very research oriented and the other is more industry oriented. And besides that, obviously there's a difference in the degree you get, but same university, almost the same courses, the same profs.
Yeah, thank you, Punya and Advait. There was a question that is GRE required for PhD positions in US and Canadian universities? Punya, you can answer first.
Honestly, I'm not sure. Like, again, I think the GRE, even this semester, the GRE is not required by even MS university right now. Some of them are completely fine with waiving GRE even for this, for the upcoming fall admissions in 2022. Again, it's only some of them. I think the best way to look at it is if if you want to go for a PhD, if you want to continue the PhD, look at the code, look at where you want to go, and they have it there. Like, it's very clearly mentioned in admission requirements as to what they want.
And Advait, if you want to add something to this.
Yeah, I think so. I think for a lot of PhD programs, you don't need the GRE, but the best way to find out is look up the program that you're going for and look at the requirements, as Punya said.
Yeah, okay, thanks. So the next question is, since the Magoo subscription is fairly expensive, are there any free resources which you might suggest? Or like a cheaper alternative or certain alternatives to Magoo?
So Magoosh has a textbook. Obviously, you will not have the luxury of being like, I'm just going to attempt the quant section and get 20 randomized questions. But it does have a textbook which covers almost everything in terms of, like I was talking about the videos and the like, which you'll see for, which at least I saw for verbal. It has a textbook which covers all of that mostly. But again, if you want to give mock tests or, attempt a section, if you want to attempt a section, like, just give like 30 minutes one section, see your score, you obviously have very few alternatives as compared to just doing a subscription service, or either finding the questions, giving them, and then manually checking.
And Advait, you want to say something?
I mean, I don't think the question's very applicable to me because everything I did was without paying for it. So yeah, so you can totally check out the repository that Amog has. You can use the free apps. You at least for me, I didn't need to pay for my preparation because I could make use of the stuff that I found online and spend some time and do it. But if you think that a paid program is going to work better for you, then that's the best decision in your case. But yeah, so if you're looking for free resources, you can check out the stuff that I spoke about at the start.
So thank you, Advait and Punya, for sharing your views on this. We'll move on to the next question. The next question is for management programs like MBA, which is better? Is it GRE or GMAT? And there's a follow-up to this. It's is there a method where you can translate your GRE score to a GMAT? So Punya, would you go first?
Yeah, so there is like some MBA schools do accept GRE right now, and there is a GMAT equivalent. But I think it's just better if you're sure about you wanting to do a MBA, just give the GMAT. It's going to be less hassle. Some people, you don't know the application process behind it, so might as well just go with the standard one instead of being like giving the GRE and then giving a converted score for the GMAT.
So that was very helpful, Punya. Advait, would you like to add anything to this?
Honestly, I don't know a lot about the management and MBA programs, so I'd suggest just suggest looking up the programs and what sort of requirements they have.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Advait and Punya. So the next question is, does the admission committee consider how long ago someone gave the GRE? Like, say if someone gives the exam in 2021, despite their undergrad being completed in 2023, will it make a difference? Advait, you can go first.
Wait, so the question is, does giving the GRE earlier?
Yeah, does the time, how does it affect our chances of admission, like how long we gave the examination? Suppose a person gives the exam in 2021 and he applies for admission in 2023. Will it make his application less considerable than someone who gave it in 2023?
I don't think that'll be the case. I think for most of them, the GRE is just sort of like a threshold thing. What's more important is what you write about and what you show them in your application or your resume. So yeah, I don't think that should be a problem at all.
Yeah, thank you, Advait. So let's go on to the next question. Someone asked, how would you suggest the preparation for someone in language in the verbal section if the person is not that much into reading? And what is the best plan for him for the verbal section if only a few months are left for the exam? Advait, Advait, you can go first.
Yeah, so obviously reading, if you are into reading, that's really going to help out your preparation just in general. But I don't think you have to be hardcore into any of it. I think all the resources that Punya and I spoke about are things that you can use without having to spend a lot of time reading complex novels or vocabulary or literature. So yeah, you can definitely use the flashcards. They're going to help you build your vocabulary. You can use the Magoosh service as a timeline that you can work on. And so I think that's definitely something you might want to look into if you have a fixed timeline and you would think it better if like some service could organize your time for you. I think Punya might want to talk about the second part of the question with the few months left bit.
Yeah, Punya, you can go.
Could you just repeat the question once more?
The second part of the was, suppose a person who hasn't prepared much for the language and the verbal section and he isn't into reading. So how should he, what should be his approach if few months are left for the examination? How should he like prepare for it?
So ideally, I would say, so if you are not that into reading, your reading comprehensions, doing reading comprehensions might take some time because you do have to obviously read whatever's given and slightly analyze it before once you do it. I would say if that's the case, at least when you're prepping for it, always for the reading comprehension, read all the questions beforehand. So at least you know which parts to focus on. I would say if you are at this situation, then focus a good amount on your vocabulary building, because I think in that limited amount of time, that's the best way for you to boost your score. Because if you can help, like if you have a couple of months, even if you have 2 months, and you're focusing on building your vocabulary, you can actually do well in the other questions besides the reading comprehension. I think for reading comprehension, it's just something that's going to build with practice.
So thank you, Punya and Advait, for answering this one. We'll move on to the next question, which is a branch change, for example, a B in electronics to an MS in CS? Is it easier? Is it difficult? Advait, would you like to go first?
Yeah. So I'm not sure what easy and difficult would mean, because that's again a subjective thing, but it's definitely possible. There's people that do it. There's a lot of people that do it. When you're trying to do something like that, I suppose what becomes relevant is what you've done in your undergrad that's sort of directed you towards or made you more interested in your secondary, like in the degree you want to pursue if you're a master's. So if while doing your undergrad in another degree, you've still done projects that are around a specific topic in CS that has informed your decision of going for your master's in that specific topic in CS, then you're all set, honestly, because that's all you need to show them. You just need to show them what makes you a good student for the degree you're applying for. And then at that point, your undergrad matters to the extent that you've done some courses before, so the prerequisites and stuff like that might be a little different. But again, most programs sort of account for that. So if you have done work, if you have done research, if you have done projects and courses that are relevant to a CS degree, then you can definitely switch over. Yeah.
Thanks for that, Advait. Punya, would you like to add anything?
I think, again, a big part of it is obviously how you present yourself to colleges. One thing you might want to be wary about is that if you, again, this is more like if you do get accepted, they are going to have you do a lot of courses which you probably didn't fill in your prerequisites. Another thing you should look for is that some colleges, UMass, I'm giving an example, they want you to only have a CS undergraduate degree to apply for masters. So you need to actually properly go to each college's website and look at what they require. Because if they immediately start with the we want a CS undergraduate, then there's no chance of you getting in, regardless, because you won't get through the screening process itself for them to even consider your application. So again, it's a very college-based thing, I think.
So thank you for that, Punya and Advait. So with this, we come to the end of our GRE Champs session, and thank you, Advait and Punya, for sharing your journeys, taking your time out, and clearing the doubts for all the aspirants here. I think it surely tips the scales in favor of everyone here. We loved having you, and before you leave, it would be great if both of you could share your conclusion, anything you want to end. Advait, would you like to go?
Yeah, sure. So I think, again, as I said in the start, it's if you're going to go through this entire process of doing college applications, it's going to be a while, right? So you just have to sit tight and like trust the process and take it like small steps at a time, because I can imagine there being a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety possibly for some people, and I think the best way to go forward is to just have small sort of steps that you just take one at a time, and instead of just like looking at the bigger picture the whole time, just take the small tasks first, and go ahead that way. And also, I think one of the things that you will definitely feel after, say, a couple of weeks of your GRE prep is that it's more of like getting over a bump, right? Like at the start of your verbal prep, there's gonna be like, out of 10 words, you're not gonna know 6 words, 7 words, 8 words, maybe even all 10 words. But once you start getting a hang of it, once you start doing a little bit more of your prep, once you start doing a little bit more of your practice, you're gonna get over that bump. And after you're over it, honestly, it's more of just doing it consistently, having some sort of pattern that you follow, and yeah, I think you'll do great once you've reached that point. So all the best to everyone that's here, and thank you so much to ARC for organizing this and getting me to talk for it. And if anybody has anything else that they would like to talk to, you can obviously contact me later too.
So thank you a lot. Thank you so much, Advait, for taking your time out and addressing the aspirants here. And Punya, would you like to share some wisdom with the aspirants?
Okay, sure. This is a lot more GRE specific. I think I'd like to point this out because I messed this part up too. So at least when I gave it, which was in April this year, you have the option of sending scores to 4 or 5 colleges that you want to for free, and later it's going to be more expensive. Turns out you need to know the country as well as the state as to where the college is, because only then you can search it up. I did not know that, so I did not send it to any of the colleges I had to. I ended up having to send it to just like I had to find the locations and a state. So wherever I wanted to send it to, they didn't have the state in the name. So like I didn't know where to send it to. So when you are giving it, just keep that in mind, a small thing, I guess. Also, I would say the day before you go for your GRE, ETS on its webpage has a list of guidelines that are there for things you should follow. Probably go through that, because then they'll even tell you, yeah, you can get this ID. This is the kind of stuff that you can get to the test center, things you can't get to a test center. So at least you won't be caught in the unawares. One thing is, right now I'm not sure if they accepted or not. When I gave it, they still weren't accepting an Aadhaar card. So you had to get the original copy of your passport, because someone in front of me got the Aadhaar card and they weren't accepting that as a valid ID. But as Advait said about the entire application process, this is kind of like the first step. So, and it's not going to be the end of it, but you also have the option of giving the GRE multiple times, even if you don't do well once. And you also have the option of sending colleges that you want to apply to your latest score. So they won't even know how many times you've given the GRE. So it is the first step, but it is at least a repeatable first step. So like trust in the process, as Advait said, and best of luck for everyone who's giving it. And obviously, thanks ARC for organizing this talk. I'm glad I was able to help out.
Thanks a lot, Advait and Punya, for making this talk possible. I would like to thank everyone for attending this talk. We hope that it proved to be insightful and informative. Please fill up the feedback form that has been put in the chat box. Your suggestions are valuable to us. Also, subscribe to the ARC YouTube channel, the link of which has been put in the chat box. All the best to all of you and have a good night. Thank you.
I would also like to thank all the speakers and the attendees here. And thank you and have a good night.